Look up at the night sky of any world within the Imperium of Man, and if you are blessed with the second sight of a navigator, you will see it. A blazing star, a golden needle piercing the thick, oily darkness of the warp. This is the Astronomican, the holy light of Terra. To the trillions of citizens across the galaxy, it is the ultimate symbol of the Emperor's protection, the divine lighthouse that guides humanity's ships through the hellish tides of the immaterium. But beneath the propaganda and the hymns of the ecclesiarchy lies a reality so chilling that it would shatter the sanity of an ordinary man. The light you see is not fueled by solar fusion or holy magic, but by a relentless, industrial-scale consumption of human souls. It is a beacon built on a foundation of billions of bleached bones, maintained by a machine that demands a price paid in eternal agony. Today, we peel back the golden veil to see what fuels the fire. Before we descend into the depths of the Hollow Mountain, I must ask you to join our vigil. If you seek to decode the grim truths of this universe and ensure the light of knowledge never fades, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. Your support is the fuel that keeps this archive running amidst the encroaching shadows. Now, let us begin our journey to the heart of the most expensive machine in human history. Consider the scale of this operation. The Astronomican is not merely a piece of technology. It is a psychic manifestation, a scream of pure will directed into the void. To understand it, we must first understand the warp, that chaotic, predatory dimension that mirrors our own. Without the Astronomican, every ship that enters the warp would be blind, drifting helplessly into the maws of demons. It is the only thing keeping the Imperium from collapsing into a million isolated, dying worlds. The source of this light is located on Holy Terra itself, within a massive hive-like structure known as the Hollow Mountain. This is the headquarters of the Adeptus Astronomica, a mysterious and reclusive branch of the imperial bureaucracy. Built into the peaks of the Forbidden Ridge, the mountain is a labyrinth of crystalline chambers, psychically shielded corridors, and ancient machinery that predates the Great Crusade. It is a place of heavy silence, broken only by the low hum of power. Inside these walls, the air is thick with the scent of ozone and incense, but there is something else beneath, a faint metallic tang of blood and the psychic pressure of 1,000 dying minds. The mountain is designed to focus psychic energy on a scale that defies comprehension. Every corridor is etched with protective runes meant to keep the raw power of the warp from leaking into the physical world. It is a cathedral of stone and circuit, dedicated to a singular, terrible purpose. The Adeptus Astronomica themselves are men and women who have dedicated their lives to the preservation of the light. Many are failed psychers, those whose power was not quite enough to serve as sanctioned psychers or inquisitors, yet too valuable to be wasted. They spend their days monitoring the flow of energy, ensuring the machinery remains functional, and preparing the fuel for the great choir. They are the silent custodians of a nightmare, moving like ghosts through the shadows of the peaks. Now imagine the physical presence of the mountain. It towers over the surrounding wastes of Terra, a jagged tooth of rock and reinforced plasteel. Its summit is capped with a massive psychic emitter, a spire that looks less like a telescope and more like a weapon aimed at the heavens. To look upon it with your physical eyes is impressive, but to sense it with your mind is to see a pillar of fire that reaches beyond the stars, blinding in its intensity. This light, however, is not a steady glow. It pulses with the heartbeat of the thousands of individuals locked within its core. These are the members of the choir, the individuals chosen to sing the Emperor's song. They are housed in the most sacred and most terrifying part of the mountain, the chamber of the galactic lighthouse. Here, the boundary between the material and the immaterial is at its thinnest, held together only by the sheer force of human sacrifice and ancient technology. The technology within the Hollow Mountain is poorly understood even by the tech priests of Mars. Much of it is archaeotech, remnants from the dark age of technology that the Emperor himself repurposed for his great work. It is a hybrid of biological processing and mechanical amplification, a living machine that requires a constant influx of psychic potential to remain active. If the machines were to stop for even a second, the light would vanish and the Imperium would die in an instant. At the heart of the chamber sits the choir. Imagine 10,000 psychers seated in tiered ranks that spiral upward into the darkness. They are connected to the machinery by thick bundles of neurocables, their bodies encased in life support suits that look more like coffins than armor. These individuals are the fuel. They do not pilot ships or fight wars, they simply sit and they scream. Their collective psychic voice is directed and focused into the singular beam of the Astronomican. This is where the horror becomes intimate. To be a member of the choir is to experience a death that lasts for months. As they sing, their psychic essence is slowly drained away by the machinery. It is a process of total erosion. First, their memories fade, then their sense of self, and finally, their physical bodies begin to wither. They are being burned like wax candles, their souls the wick, and their pain the light that guides the navigators across the stars. Now, consider the psychic scream that navigators hear. For those gifted enough to perceive it, the Astronomican is not a silent light. It is a cacophony of 10,000 voices screaming in unison. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, a psychic frequency that can drive a weak mind to madness. Navigators must learn to filter this scream, to find the pulse within the noise, using the pain of others to find their way home. It is a grim irony that humanity's survival depends on a choir of ghosts. The madness within the choir is a constant threat. As the psychers are drained, their mental barriers collapse, making them vulnerable to the whispers of the warp. Some begin to laugh hysterically, while others weep without end, their tears evaporating in the intense heat generated by the psychic friction. The Adeptus Astronomica must constantly monitor the output of each individual. When a psycher's soul is finally spent, when the candle has burned to nothing, they are simply disconnected and replaced. But what if you were one of them? Imagine being plucked from your home, branded as a mutant, and brought to Terra in the cold belly of a black ship. You are told you are serving the Emperor, that your sacrifice is holy. Then you are plugged into a machine that begins to eat your mind. You feel your thoughts being pulled out of your skull, your very essence being converted into a golden radiation. There is no escape, no sleep, only the eternal burning light of the choir. This is the moment of the reveal. You see the golden light on the horizon, a promise of safety and a home. You feel the engines hum as the navigator locks on to the signal. But then, the static clears and you hear it, the sound of 10,000 souls being shredded at once. It is not a song, it is a plea for death that goes unanswered. This is the engine of the Imperium, a machine that turns human suffering into the only currency that matters in a galaxy of war. The turnover rate for the choir is staggering. Every single day, dozens, sometimes hundreds of psychers reach their limit and die. Their bodies are removed, usually reduced to husks or piles of ash, and replaced by the next batch of recruits. This constant cycle of death and replacement is the secret pulse of the Astronomican. It is a conveyor belt of souls, an industrial process that treats the most precious resource of the human race as nothing more than disposable batteries.
To sustain a fire of such magnitude, the Imperium requires a constant, never-ending supply of fuel. This fuel is not mined from asteroids or synthesized in laboratories. It is harvested from the very population of the Imperium. Every world, from the most crowded hive city to the most remote feudal outpost, is subject to the psychic tithe. This is where the black ships of the Adeptus Astrotelepathica come into play, silent predators that prowl the stars, collecting the untold horror that is the psyker population. The black ships are essentially massive spacefaring prisons, shielded against the psychic turbulence of their cargo. Life aboard these vessels is a precursor to the nightmare of Terra. Thousands of psychers are kept in cramped, null-shielded cells, their powers suppressed by agonizing neural limiters. The journey to Terra can take months or even years due to the unpredictability of the warp, and during this time, many succumb to madness or the predations of their cellmates. This is the industrial scale of imperial sacrifice, a systemic harvesting of human potential. Once these ships reach Holy Terra, the cargo is processed with a cold, bureaucratic efficiency that would make a tech priest proud. The psychers are categorized by their strength, stability, and utility. Some are destined to become sanctioned psychers or astropaths, but the vast majority, those deemed too weak or unstable to serve in any other capacity, are sent to the Hollow Mountain. They are the daily sacrifice, a term that barely scratches the surface of the horrifying truth behind the Golden Throne and the Astronomican. Now, consider the sheer scale of this logistics chain. We are talking about thousands of ships, millions of personnel, and an endless stream of human souls moving towards a single point in the galaxy. It is a machine that never sleeps, because the light can never flicker. If the black ships were to stop, if the tithe were to fail, the Astronomican would go dark within days. The Imperium's survival is predicated on this organized, galaxy-wide kidnapping and subsequent execution. Before we explore the connection between this psychic choir and the Emperor himself, let us pause for a moment. Managing the logistics of an entire galaxy is no small feat, much like managing a community of lore enthusiasts. If you are finding this breakdown insightful, please take a second to like this video. It helps the great algorithm recognize our efforts and spreads the word to more citizens of the Imperium. Now, let us look at the lens that focuses this agony.
It is a common misconception that the Astronomican is simply the Emperor's own psychic power projected into space. The reality is far more complex and far more tragic. While the choir provides the raw power, the Emperor acts as the focus, the supreme psychic lens through which this energy is channeled and directed. Without his divine will to shape the chaos of 10,000 screaming souls, the Astronomican would be nothing more than a psychic storm, as dangerous to navigators as the warp itself. Sitting upon the Golden Throne, the Emperor must divide his focus between a multitude of impossible tasks. He must hold the webway gate closed, maintain his own failing life force, and simultaneously act as the conductor for the choir within the Hollow Mountain. This is the daily sacrifice in its most literal sense, not just the psychers who die, but the Emperor's own eternal torment as he filters their agony through his mind. He is the bridge between the material and the immaterial, a role that has kept him in a state of living death for 10 millennia. Imagine the mental fortitude required to process the collective suffering of 10,000 psychers every single second. The Emperor does not just hear the scream, he feels it. He must take that raw, discordant energy and refine it into a singular, guiding light. This process is what creates the holy nature of the Astronomican. It is an extension of his will, a psychic signature so powerful that it can be felt across the entire galaxy, acting as a North Star for humanity's survival. This connection creates a terrifying feedback loop. The more psychers are consumed, the more energy the Emperor must manage. As the galaxy becomes increasingly unstable and the Great Rift tears through reality, the demand on the Astronomican grows. This is the disturbing reality of Slaanesh, Tzeentch, and the other chaos gods. They feast on the ripples caused by this psychic exertion. The Emperor is fighting a losing battle, using the souls of his subjects to hold back a tide that only grows stronger with every sacrifice.
But what happens when the light flickers? History gives us a glimpse into this apocalypse. During the events of the Noctis Aeterna, or the Great Darkness, the Astronomicon went dark following the birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum. For a period of time, the beacon vanished, and the Imperium was plunged into literal and spiritual shadows. Millions of ships were lost in the warp instantly, their navigators blinded, and their crews left at the mercy of the entities that dwell within the Sea of Souls. Without the light, the Imperium is no longer an empire. It is a collection of 1 million isolated graveyards. Communication becomes impossible, reinforcements cannot be sent, and worlds are left to face the terrifying reality of fighting orcs or the horrifying reality of Nurgle's gifts entirely alone. The Great Darkness proved that the Astronomicon is the only thing preventing a total collapse of human civilization. Its absence is not just a tactical disadvantage, it is an extinction-level event. The psychological impact of the light failing is just as devastating. To the navigators, the sudden silence of the Astronomicon is like being plunged into a sensory deprivation tank while being hunted by predators. The eldritch horror of the warp becomes unavoidable when the one point of reference is gone. For the common citizen, the disappearance of the Emperor's light is a sign that the end times have finally arrived, leading to mass suicides, cult uprisings, and a breakdown of the social order in suffocating hive cities. Now imagine the strain on the Hollow Mountain during such a crisis. When the light failed, it wasn't because they ran out of fuel. It was because the psychic turbulence was so great that even the Emperor could not maintain the focus. The choir likely died in an instant, their minds shattered by the backlash of the warp. To restart the beacon required a sacrifice of even greater proportions, a desperate attempt to relight the fire before the darkness became permanent. This is the fragility of the human race in the 41st millennium. To truly grasp the weight of the Astronomicon, you must see it through the eyes of a navigator at the moment the light flickers. Imagine navigating a sea of invisible monsters, and suddenly your only North Star vanishes. For a navigator, this is not just darkness, it is a sudden spiritual void, a loneliness so profound it can tear a soul apart. Even the scream of the choir is a tether to life. Without it, they are left with only the mocking laughter of the warp. The cold reality is that the Imperium does not care for the individual suffering of those in the choir or the victims collected by the black ships. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, humans are merely biological components processed with the same mechanical indifference as a servitor. The Astronomicon is the ultimate symbol of this philosophy. Human survival is so paramount it justifies every atrocity, turning mass sacrifice into a systematic, industrial necessity
that fuels the horrifying truth of the Golden Throne. We must ask the critical question, is there any other way? Without the daily sacrifice of thousands of souls, humanity would fracture into isolated pockets, easily devoured by tyrannids or the temptations of chaos. This is a philosophical trap. To protect humanity from extinction at the hands of chaos gods, the Imperium has become a machine that literally consumes its own. Survival is not bought with courage, but with the eternal, unchosen agony of the weak. Now, when you look at that golden light in the night sky, you no longer see divinity. You see the blood flowing through the conduits of the hollow mountain. You see the faces of the young psychers taken by the black ships, their potential harvested like wheat. This is the horrifying reality every navigator carries. They steer their ships using the souls of their kin as fuel. It is a psychological burden that leads to a madness as deep as any Geller field.
The Astronomican will continue to burn as long as the Imperium can harvest enough souls to throw into the furnace. It is a testament to the Emperor's iron will, but also a death sentence for human compassion. We have turned the galaxy into a place where hope is only found in organized suffering. This flame never goes out, but it never warms. It only illuminates the path to more war, more sacrifice, and a 10,000-year-old death. So, what is your verdict on the cost of this light? Is the survival of the species worth the perpetual torment of billions? Or have we become worse than the monsters we hide from in the warp? Leave your thoughts below, for in the grim darkness of the far future, your curiosity is one of the few things the Inquisition cannot yet reach. Thank you for joining Silent Imperium for this decoding. Stay vigilant, for the shadows are always hungry.